Our guest speaker today for our workshop is David Harris. David is a leader in the field of questionnaire design and qualitative research. He received his BA from Reed College in Portland, Oregon, and his MA in quantitative psychology from the prestigious L.L. Thurstone Psychometric Laboratory at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. David is committed to supporting better decision-making for organizations of all kinds through the application of sound and thoughtful research principles and methods. Currently, David is head of marketing insights and analytics at MERS North America. Prior to him joining MERS North America, David was director of research methods for GlaxoSmithKline. David is also the author of the book, The Complete Guide to Writing Questionnaires, How to Get Better Information for Better Decisions. And we're really excited to tell you that for those of you who are here in person, we have a complimentary copy for each one of you. So if you haven't gotten it, make sure you get it before you leave. So without further delay, I will give you David Harris.
Well, hello everyone. My name is David Harris. It's a pleasure to be talking with you today on the topic of how to write better questionnaires. And for everyone who's viewing live stream, I assume you have a copy of the slides, and I'm going to do my best to signal when I'm changing slides and what slide number I'm on. I actually have somebody in the room who's going to help me do that if I forget. So we only have an hour, so let's jump right in. The agenda is as follows. I'm going to start with why on earth I spent 5 years writing this book, because in order to point out some of the enormous problems I'm attempting to solve really for all of us. Then I'm going to talk about some key important experiments in survey research to highlight just how fragile the survey response is. Then I'm going to talk about a framework for writing questionnaires, and that's something I had to put together in writing the book because I just couldn't keep track of all the things that we needed to do. It's a sequential process. There are lots of guidelines, and I found that helpful. I hope you find it helpful too. And then there's a lot of information in here. I'm going to talk about 8 key themes for writing questionnaires. And those key themes, if you do those right, you're going to get better information. Hopefully you'll have fewer headaches and you'll be in a position to make better decisions for your organization. And then we'll do some Q&A. And if I'm successful, you'll have just an enormous sense of concern about the amount of measurement error that can come from our surveys because how fragile the survey response really is. You'll have the idea that questionnaire design needs to be taken a lot more seriously, and you'll have these 8 key themes on how to write better questionnaires. And I will go over those towards the second half of the presentation. Okay, what problems do I want to solve? Why on earth did I write this book? Well, in 2001, as you know, I became director of research methods at a very large company. We spent $50 million a year doing marketing research. We did over 900 projects in a year. And from that point forward until today, I mean, I look at questionnaires almost every day from all sorts of different industries. And what I see is that research is rarely organized to support decisions. There's often not enough qualitative research to inform the survey. The questionnaires are much too long. I remember one of the surveys that I looked at when I first started assessing them was, it asked the respondent for 481 responses. And that was 36 questions. It had the enormous grids. Here are these 9 products, 30 attributes, rate them all on a 1 to 10 scale. That's 270 1 to 10 ratings. I answered a survey where they asked me 11 questions. This was for a restaurant around here. They asked me 11 questions about their coffee, and I was about to blow a gasket. Like, I don't have 11 things to say about your coffee. Except now I'm sorry I ordered it. And so as I look at these surveys, and people send them to me from all sorts of different industries, you know, many of the well-intentioned questions, even the ones I've written over the years, are unclear, unanswerable, too complex, and are biased. There's far too little real pre-testing. I talk to suppliers who say, would We just can't do that. But the underlying issue is that questionnaire writing has not been thought of as a serious discipline. That's the underlying problem outside of academia and some government research. We asked just anyone around the office to draft the questionnaire. We asked them to pass it around to just about anyone to edit it. And we don't do that with legal documents. We hire attorneys. And when we hire statisticians, we make sure that we hire people with advanced degrees. And questionnaire writing needs to be taken a lot more seriously. And it's really appalling to me when I talk to people who do this all the time and they don't have a book on how to do this. And so I thought, you know what? We need one. Writing a questionnaire is arguably one of the most difficult forms of writing. If I'm writing poetry or short story, individual interpretation is just fine. Oh, and I thank you so much. We're on slide 5. It's a conversation between you and hundreds or maybe thousands of people. The conversation may take 15, 20, 45 minutes. Every single one of these diverse respondents has to understand each question exactly as you intended and be able to answer it and be able to answer it without bias. And unlike a live conversation, you're really not there to clarify ambiguities. We really evolved to converse. Respondents will only give you so much time and effort. And I'm going to stop right here and ask you, how many of you guys take surveys on a regular basis? You know, when people send them to you? Good. I have people tell me all the time who write surveys, I don't take them. They drive me crazy. I get them, they don't make sense to me. Respondents they'll understand your questions really on their terms, not yours. You may think it's right, but that's not how they think about things. And if we don't communicate well with them, they're going to just make up answers, get through the survey pretty quickly, or just drop out. All that results in measurement error, which is enormous, inaccurate or biased information, and then misunderstandings of the subject matter and bad decisions. And I would argue that measurement error is far bigger a problem than statistical error or sampling error. Think of all the effort we go through to get the sample from 100 to 150 to reduce the error that much, and yet we're bypassing how we ask questions. Okay, slide 7. Thank you. Simple question, how many cars do you own? If you were pre-testing this question, and you ask the person to think aloud as he or she was answering it, they might say something like, well, we have a son, he's at the University of Virginia, so I'm not really sure if you want me, he has a car, I'm not sure if you want me to count that. I drive a truck. Do you want to know vehicles that we have or really cars? Is that your intention? And then my wife, she drives a car that we lease. I mean, do you want me to count? I'm not really sure what you want, so I'm just going to say 2. So the first problem is with you. You is unclear. Does it count the sun? Cars. Notice how the respondent is assuming intent. And Grice, linguist, he talks about conversational norms. And we assume intent when people talk to us. Do you guys have a bathroom? Well, the intention is, where's the bathroom? Then the other one is ownership. Is that what you're really about? Is it really about ownership? There's another issue in survey research called, people call it context effects. And the best way to say that is, suppose I'm a work colleague and I say, hey, what have you done today? I mean, you're probably going to answer stuff associated with work. You might say something personal if we know each other pretty well. If I'm your orthopedic surgeon and I've been treating you for lower back pain and I ask you, what have you done today? You're going to tell me, oh, I got out of bed, I rolled out like I'm supposed to, I took a shower. You're probably going to tell me how you dried your feet. So the context informs what the question is. And so what will happen with a question like this is there'll be previous questions that may lead the person to think, oh, you want to know about automobiles. Oh, you want to know about ownership specifically. Here's another perfectly simple question. what's Dave going to tell me is wrong with this one? And I'm on slide 8. First question, did you yourself take an aspirin within the past 7 days? And then the second question is, how many vitamin bottles are in your household? Well, the problem is, did you yourself? Here's that context effect. I'm answering about me. The next question is about vitamin bottles in my household. So, some people are going to answer for themselves only. Some people are going to answer for everyone in the household. And so, again, you have measurement error. And this is a tiny example. Imagine a 15-page survey. I'm going to pick on this again. Vitamin bottles. Like, what's the difference between a vitamin and a supplement? Do people know that difference? So if you were pre-testing this, you might really have to work that through. And again, know what information do you really need for the decision. I might pick on bottles too. People might wonder, does this count as a bottle? Okay, next slide, slide 9. So I decided to write the book basically because nearly every questionnaire I've seen has questions that are biased, scales that are imbalanced, concepts that are unclear, double-barreled questions, and words and phrases that respondents don't use. I mean, it's a difficult challenge. Slight changes in how questions are worded makes a big difference. And if the questionnaires are too long, too difficult, or people don't understand them, they'll just drop out or make up answers. And there just needs to be a comprehensive, user-friendly guide on how to write questionnaires. Fortunately, go into the next slide, slide 10. There is a ton of information out there about how to write questionnaires. It's mostly in academic areas, places like the University of Michigan, University of Chicago. They have a long history, easily 70, 80 years of doing work on this, and many agencies within the federal government, and some big research organizations that you've heard of, like RTI. We have someone from RTI here. I'm going to go through some experiments that they've done on the survey response. Now, if you're one of these people, and I'm buzzing through a couple more slides with pictures, that's what your bookshelf looks like. You have all these books that you've read, and then all these articles. So the first experiment I'm going to talk about was done back in 1950. And on the left is Group A, obviously on the right is Group B. Both groups were asked the exact same question. Do you think the United States should let communist newspaper reporters from other countries come in here and send back to their papers the news as they see it? Both groups, randomly assigned, asked the same question. Group A, 36% agreed. Group B, wow, 73% agreed. What's different? This is actually an experiment on order bias. So I'm going to go to the next slide. The question you just saw, which is slide 14, the question you just saw is in that little box that's a tad green. And you can see Group B was asked a question before they answered it. And the question was, do you think a communist country like Russia should let American newspaper reporters in and send back to their papers the news as they see it? So if they answered that question, then they were much more likely to agree with the next. And this is a case of the first question affecting the next. Now, this didn't happen in 1950. I did something with my company, I can't tell you exactly what it is, but it was a question about whether it was socially acceptable for men or women to engage in a certain behavior. It's pretty common. And we had a big order bias, and it was different for men and women. So I would encourage you to, as you think about those things, if you can, maybe insert that as an experiment. It can be really interesting in your studies. Question wording. The Pew Research Center in 2003, they asked people whether they favor or oppose taking military action in Iraq to end Saddam Hussein's rule. That's on the left. On the right, and this is my bolding, they were asked the exact same question, but they added, even if it meant that U.S. forces might suffer thousands of casualties. There was a big difference. Without that added information, 68% favored military action. When you added that, 43% favored military action. And so, the question wording really matters in our surveys. Going to slide 16, just a few more examples. The one at the top in the big blue boxes, whether we talk about making it legal for doctors to give terminally ill patients the means to end their lives, or if we refer to it as suicide, you get big differences. A lot of these terms are loaded. And a lot of the terms that we have associated with products are loaded. Then welfare assistance to the poor. I worked on something recently where we referred to something as easy in a tracking study. We changed it to convenient, and I don't really know what the difference is. We got a big difference in terms of the response. So the question stem and the items, the wording really matters. Okay, open versus closed-ended questions, a big issue. You know, do we ask this open or do we ask it closed? And the Pew Research Center did their post-election survey in 2008, and they asked this closed-ended question. And the items were the economy, war in Iraq, healthcare, terrorism, energy policy, other. And 58% of people said, boy, it was the economy. They asked the exact same question in an open-ended way, and 35% said the economy. So you're getting very different responses. And, you know, the takeaway really, just to get this, you know, done in 45 minutes, do as much qualitative work up front as you can to get those items right, okay? I would ask questions in both an open and a closed-ended way. I mean, neither one is exactly right. People might argue that the open-ended one is a little bit more accurate because it's coming out of their heads. I'm going to argue with that in a second. I think another takeaway is look at the other response. In the closed-ended, 8% of people put something other. In the open-ended, it was 43% had something other than those items listed. So, you know, I work with clients all the time that think that if we put other, please specify, everyone's going to write a bunch of stuff in. They don't do it. Okay. The next study, which I think is really interesting, and a guy named Howard Schuman in his book Method and Meaning in Polls and Surveys talks about this in his discussion of open versus closed-ended studies. This was done back in 1986, and the question was, there have been a lot of national and world events and changes over the past 50 years. Would you select or mention one or two such events or changes that seem to you have been especially important? And all I want to talk about for this one is invention of the computer. In the closed-ended question with these items listed, 30% of the people selected invention of the computer. In the open-ended question, only 1% mentioned invention of the computer. And, you know, Howard in his book argues that you know, there may be things that people think are important that are, let's say, organic, kind of slow-moving, something like invention of the computer that people aren't going to think about. It's JFK assassination, exploration of space, World War II, that's in their minds right now. But they may not think about development of antibiotics, invention of the computer. But if they're prompted and that's in front of them, they'd say, you know what, that is a big issue. So it's not the case that one is better than the other. Just, you know, think it through, and there may be a reason to do both. I'm going to skip that one. I'm going to skip a slide 19, and go straight to slide 20. Question form and acquiescence bias. So somebody tells you, oh, we want to ask people to agree or disagree with this statement. The best way to ensure peace is through military strength. And in the agree-disagree format, 55% of people agree with that statement. On the right side, you tried something, forced choice. They had to choose between the best way to ensure peace is through military strength or diplomacy is the best way to ensure peace. Only 33% agreed with that statement. The best way to ensure peace is through military strength. And that's a 22% difference. It's huge. So the reason why it's important to know, you know, the wonderful history of work, I mean, academics have been talking about how agree-disagree statements lead to acquiescence bias, or people just saying, you know, yes, or being positive about it when they're really not. I'll talk about this a little bit when I talk about writing a questionnaire plan and making a distinction between the information you need versus how to ask the question. The next slide is slide 21. This is, I think, the last experiment I'm going to talk about. Students were asked how many hours per day they study. and they're randomly assigned. On the left side, they were given a low range of answer choices, half an hour to an hour to hour and a half. And 23% said, I study 2.5 hours, more than 2.5 hours a day. On the right-hand side, they were given a high range of answer choices. Okay, 2.5 hours, 2.5 to 3, 3 to 3.5. 69% of the students said they studied 2.5 hours per day or more. And this isn't just a student thing, it's been studied for TV, viewing, computer usage. And how many times are we asking people to select their numeric response from a range, and we're just struggling like, what should the range be? How many cigarettes do you smoke a day? How many visits, how many patients have you seen? How many times have you gone to the grocery store? So the categories have an effect on the responses. And so what I would say certainly is do as much qualitative work as you can, make sure you understand that distribution, and just keep in mind that this is influencing the response. Okay, the framework. When I started putting together this book, it was hard for me to keep track of everything because there's so many things involved in designing a good questionnaire. And then there are also so many different guidelines. But it all starts before you write any questions. It starts with planning research to support decisions. What are we going to do when the study's done? Doing qualitative research first, and then planning the questionnaire before you write any questions. Then, I remember this so well. I had so many guidelines for writing questions, and I couldn't keep track of them all. And I realized they started to fall into categories. They were either about making questions clear, making questions answerable, making questions easy, or making questions unbiased. And right there, when I talk about the most important themes, those are the 7 that I'm going to talk about next. There are 3 tasks we ask of respondents. We ask them to select from a list, we ask them to rate something on a scale, or we ask them an open-ended question. So in the spirit of making questions clear, answerable, easy, and unbiased, there are special cases of that for presenting lists, rating scales, and asking open-ended questions. Then the all-important near final step is pre-testing the questionnaire, where you really sit down with people and see if those questions worked. And I'm going to point out with the stars there that when we're able to do this really well, we're talking to our respondent group twice. We're sandwiching it before we ever do anything. We're having a discussion. We're doing qualitative work. And in the end, we're testing our questions. The first 3 themes on slide 23 are right here. And up in the right-hand corner, I have that little green bar. That's like when you're at Disney World, you are here to help keep track of this. Let's start with slide 24, planning research to support decisions. So critical. I find when I do this with clients, they love it. Most people don't have the decision really fully framed up, but it really is the only way to figure out what information you need. Otherwise, it's a questionnaire that's just getting emailed around, and people are adding things, and it gets combobulated, and then you end up with that context effect or order bias. But it's when you define that. I mean, for example, if you are testing which of 3 concepts to progress to maybe a print or TV ad, versus we'll decide whether to launch this TV or print ad. Those are 2 very different studies. One's more volumetric. It's important to nail that in the beginning. And I will tell you, that'll keep your questionnaire really tight and short. You won't have 481 responses that you're asking of a respondent. Oh, and just one other example. I worked with a college on their attrition problem, and of course they framed it up as, hey, can you survey dropouts? Well, that's a questionnaire. I mean, that's a type of study or something. But when I started to work with them on what are we going to do? Are we going to change are we thinking about possibly changing the admissions criteria? Are we thinking about changing the requirements in the freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year? Are we thinking about intervening in the social environment? Maybe there's something going on. Maybe we talk to some people first and we think about other things that might need to be, altered. It's only when you do that and you do that qualitative work and define the decisions that you know what information to do and also what study type to do. Because quite frankly, we learned a lot by talking to people who are there, talking to people in their freshman, sophomore, junior year. What I like to do is frame it up as we will decide, and if that's too challenging for people, because some people will say, hey, who are you to come in here and hammer me on what I'm going to decide? Because decisions are tough within organizations. Things like, what do you hope to find? Boy, if this comes out positive, what do you think you're going to be able to do? Conduct qualitative research first. The important thing on the most basic level, to know what to ask and how to ask it, and to figure out who you need to survey. Sometimes you find out, wow, they don't make the decision at all. It's some other group. But on a deeper level, really to understand a topic, qualitative research gives a different perspective that is just different than quantitative. And I don't like the idea that one's better than the other. The best metaphor I have for it now is that qualitative work is more like a physician's examination, and quantitative work is more like imaging. And so you need to have a doctor up close and personal, asking questions, getting information, doing an in-person personal examination. But you don't know what to measure and how to measure it until you have that done. And the X-ray, the MRI, the CAT scan, that's going to give you information that the doctor can't. So one's not better than the other. They're both work together. Moving to slide 26. Writing a questionnaire plan. This is a huge topic. I hope I can convey this pretty quickly and move on to the next. I just put something in Excel and imported it. The purpose of a questionnaire plan is to put that decision right up in front of you. We will decide. Then, 3 columns. On the far left, what information do we need? And this is so helpful. I talk with people all the time. They want to write questions. Dave, ask them on a scale of 1 to 10, the patients who just quit seeing someone else but have never been injected, and you go down that road, you don't get anywhere. What do you really want to know? Oh, I want to know, how would you talk to me about this? So I work that out with clients. Then it helps keep the order of information in order. So you start chunking that, and then in the middle you ask how to ask the question. And then you can think through how you're going to analyze the data. I'm going to do a quick example. For an awareness trial and usage study, if you're thinking through what decisions they might support, you might decide how to adjust the messages for the brand. And so as I'm working on a questionnaire plan, this is a tiny part of it, I might say, wow, what information do we need? Are customers receiving our brand messages? I mean, later on I'll think of things like how to ask the question like, how well do each of the following statements describe each brand? Contains aloe vera, has sunscreen, no parabens, whatever. So you're working through what information do you need. Then over there on the analysis plan side, you're going to, I wrote in there, I'm going to see if that's message reception is correlated and associated with using the product or intent to use the product. That'll give us some information about which messages are working, which ones aren't. And so that's the spirit of writing a questionnaire plan. And I've had people say, we don't have time to do that. I can do this in a day. And I've worked with people where I saw the questionnaire they were passing around and it's been floating for 6 weeks. Order misunderstanding is an issue that the questionnaire plan helps with. And I'm on slide 28. For those of you who are listening remotely. I just highlighted in bold and in colors where people get messed up. First question is about the past 30 days, then 2 questions about the most recent headache, then the 4th question is about the past 30 days, and people get tripped up. And so they will answer. Even though you say, my gosh, it's written right there, they'll answer that last question. Some will about the most recent headache. They'll say the most recent headache was moderate and check that or something. That's one of the main things that a questionnaire planning will help you with, because you'll chunk a section and go, oh, I want to know about the past 30 days. Oh, down here we'll ask about the most recent headache. On slide 29, writing a questionnaire plan, I'm going to harp on this point for just a minute more. Distinguishing between the information needed and how to ask the question. This was a real study. How did you rate the technical skills of the technician who repaired your computer? People said, well, who were taking the survey, I don't know. If somebody came and picked it up, they brought it back 2.5 hours later and it worked. I don't know. I can't answer that. When you talk to the person who wrote that in the questionnaire when it was passed around, he or she might say, oh, I just want to know if they're satisfied with the repair process. Okay, well then maybe that's what we need to ask about. How interested are you in this new product? So often I heard a story on NPR where everyone was really interested in this new diagnostic. They spent millions, they prepared it, they took it out to the market. Didn't sell. But the study said they were very interested in it. Maybe what they really wanted to know was what was the market potential. Okay, how likely were people to actually buy this? I love this one. Is your dog a vegetarian? Comes from a real survey. So if you talk to the person, I want to add, how did your dog decide to be a vegetarian instead of a vegan? But if you talk to the person, they might say something like, well, we're trying to decide whether to come out with a meatless dog food line, and what we're really interested in is, do they want to feed their dog meat? Have they fed their dog meat? Something like that. And it's a challenge to get people to not write questions. I mean, I have to tell them that over and over again. No, pretend you're just talking to me. Well, what on earth do you want to know? So those are the first 3 themes. I'm on slide 30. Thank you. Write a questionnaire plan. Do qualitative research first. And then, write a research plan. Organize research to support decisions. Do qualitative work first. Then write a questionnaire plan. Okay. So you haven't even written questions yet. Well, now we're going to try and do that. This section right here is about making questions clear, answerable, easy, and unbiased. And some of the things are about lists, rating scales, and asking open-ended questions. So this is just a guide to show you how this works. On slide 32, you'll see that Make Questions Clear has 8 specific guidelines on it. We don't have time to go over all of them, so I'm just going to go over some that I think are the most interesting and fun. But for Make Questions Clear, it's about state the unit of measurement, use the vocabulary of respondents, use precise words and phrases, etc., etc. So let's look at some examples. Okay, slide 33. This question was administered to women who were discharged from a hospital with a healthy baby. How long was your baby in the hospital? Well, some answered in inches, some answered in days. State the unit of measurement. How many days was your baby in the hospital, or how many inches was your baby in the hospital? I see these types of things all the time. They're usually not as funny, though. Okay, slide 34. How frequently do you go to the grocery store? Okay. Fred says, I go there once a week. That's pretty frequently, so I'll say frequently. Joe says, I go there once a week. That's not much, so I'll say infrequently. Frequency is not a unit of measurement. So again, state the unit of measurement. In the past 30 days, how many times have you yourself gone to the grocery store? So notice also that we're stating a time frame. And to make questions answerable, the time frame has to be reasonable. And we think maybe someone can do that for 30 days. I don't know. I'd have to pretest it. And then there's also the technique of writing in the box what they're supposed to put there. Number of times gone to the grocery store. Slide 35. Given to psychiatrists, thinking of your typical depression patient, for what percentage do you prescribe Prozac? I'm just going to give you the guideline. Use the vocabulary of respondents, use precise terms and phrases. What's a typical depression patient? And I know what people are thinking. They're thinking kind of like on average or something like that, but it's not going to work in the survey. Slide 36. Of the last 100 patients you have personally seen for weight control, how many are currently following the American Heart Association exercise program? And the problem with that is that the doctor doesn't know what the last 100 patients are doing. So don't ask people for information that they simply don't have. And this is the theme of making questions answerable. So I don't know what they really want for this, but you might ask, thinking of the last 10 patients you have personally saw for weight control, for how many of these 10 patients did you recommend the AHA exercise program, if any? May not be the best question, but it's in the category of, he or she might know the answer to that. Excuse me. Another one on making questions answerable. Thinking of the past 12 months, how often have you baked cake? Sarah says, well, I bake cakes when there's a birthday party. We've had 3 in my family this year, all in November. Does that mean 3 times a month? And then Jamie says, I do 1 or 2 cakes every month during the school year. I don't bake anything in the summer. I do pies for holidays. I'm not sure how to answer this question. Don't assume regularity of behavior. There are a lot of questions where we do that. I mean, how often do you mow the lawn? Once a week, twice a week? Well, what month are you talking about? Travel by air, etc. Slide 38. This has to do with making questions clear, making questions answerable. Do you regularly read the newspaper? Do you generally exercise in the morning? Just avoid vague modifiers. State the unit of measurement and a time frame. People are going to have different interpretations of regularly and generally. I've pre-tested stuff and they go, I don't know what you mean by regularly. I don't know what you mean by generally. The 6th major theme is make questions easy. Instead of showing some examples, whatever you can do, keep the question under 25 words. And the way I think that really helps is just try asking the question as if you were talking to somebody. Sometimes that really long question comes down to just a simple phrase. Okay, limit the length of the questionnaire. That goes back to organizing the research to support decisions. We need this information for those decisions, maybe this other information, and I think it's also important to get through to people that if you ask too much, you're going to compromise the data that you really need. Certainly don't ask for more detail than you need. And those complex grids, just don't do that. It's always easier to make them a simpler question, sort of a one at a time. Make questions unbiased. Here's a question. Considering the extremely high price of gasoline for your next vacation, are you most likely to fly, drive, take a train, etc.? And Jack says, wow, they're right. Gas is going to go through the roof. We probably should stay at home. So don't introduce ideas or opinions that will influence responses. And maybe a better way to ask this is, for your next vacation, are you more likely to? Now, if you want to see where people introduce ideas and opinions in the question stem and the response items, just look at the political surveys. Okay. Another one on make questions unbiased. This was actually given to a group of people in the company that were all working on these important projects. Will you finish your project on budget? And everyone said, sure, absolutely. Don't want to get fired. To get sensitive information, you may need to disguise the question or shift the focus away from the respondent. And I like that, shift the focus away from the respondent. Improved question. Do you foresee any circumstances, now we're talking about circumstances, not you, that might prevent you from finishing your project on budget? Well, everyone said yes. And then they wrote in what those circumstances might be. Again, on the questionnaire plan, it's easier to come up with this stuff because they're not writing questions. You're saying, hey, do we want to know what might get in the way? Oh, okay. And then proceed forward. Another one on Make Questions Unbiased. This is a scale that's used constantly. How would you rate your health? Excellent, very good, good, fair, poor. And this is used for many things other than health. Make sure bipolar scales are balanced. Oh yeah, slide 42. Make sure they're balanced. The midpoint here is fair, and you have 3 wonderful positive responses and 1, not so good negative response. I don't know why people don't use this. Improve question A. How would you rate your health? Very good, good, fair, poor, very poor, or how would you rate your health, or whatever you're rating, and you have the same number of positive and negative responses. Agree, disagree scales. Please indicate how much you agree or disagree with the following statements. And we already talked about how agree, disagree leads to positive responses. And I'm just going to pick on these. Our company values its people. Why not do a direct measure of the construct? Have them rate how much they think their company values its people on a scale of 1 to something. The company gives me an opportunity to train and develop. That's 2 different things. We have wonderful training opportunities here. There's nowhere for me to go, so I don't know how to answer the question. There's no development opportunities. And then I see this in agree, disagree scales, which I think there's a place for agree, disagree scales. You get an impression, but if you need a precise measure, maybe think of something else. I get adequate feedback from my manager. I might get wonderful feedback from my manager, so I'm going to disagree with that. So replace agree, disagree scales with direct questions about what you really want to measure. It's a place where it's pretty easy to get sloppy. And I will tell you, I have used these before, but I tighten them up. I get excellent feedback from my manager. I make item B 2 questions. And I'd leave the company values its people if they really want to keep it that way. Okay, slide 44. I'm going to talk briefly about this because I don't want to run out of time. I call this the scale toolbox. You have to think about what you want to measure. The scale, you might think like the thing on coffee. I mean, they asked me if I was satisfied with the coffee. Is satisfaction how you think about coffee? I don't think, hey, you ought to go there. I was so satisfied with the coffee. Oh my gosh. And so, you wonder. Now, your stay at a hotel, maybe. Visit to Disney World. But that may not be the scale that you want. Is it going to be unipolar or bipolar? What's the length of the scale? Unipolar, bipolar is the natural opposite. Interest. How interested are you in learning more about climate change? Is disinterested a natural opposite or not interested at all? And I don't know the answer. These are the things I struggle with when I write these things. Whether you have a midpoint on a bipolar scale, etc. The next slide is on pre-testing the questionnaire. Critical. This is where you ask respondents to go through, in their own words, tell you what they think each question's asking them, and that way you'll find out if they're interpreting it the way you intended. Ask respondents how they came up with their answers. You'll find all kinds of problems, and you can find out what certain terms mean. Like, what does family member mean to you? There are lots of different people who might be family members. What does the term own mean to you? Back to our previous car example. And very often we find out respondents think about it quite differently. This is an example from Gordon Willis's wonderful book, Cognitive Interviewing. And if you ever get a chance to hear him talk, he's really brilliant and a lot of fun. This was, I think, it was something like the adolescent survey of cigarette smoking. And the question was, do you think young people who smoke cigarettes have more friends? Definitely yes, probably not, definitely not. Well, the first problem when they pre-tested it was with the concept of young people. A 15-year-old doesn't think of him or herself as young. That's the 12-year-olds, come on. The question was intended to ask about people your age. And so they found that the term young people didn't work at all. They weren't thinking about themselves. So that needed to change. And then the next problem on slide 46 is a little harder to understand, but let me do my best. Most of the respondents believe that smoking did not affect the number of friends at all, but they thought that checking probably not or definitely not meant that they thought that they had fewer friends. Okay? So the scale, the reason why I love this example is the scale is technically right. Right? Probably not. They probably don't. It's probably neutral. But they think if they check that, that means that they're indicating that young people who smoke have fewer friends. So even though it's technically right, it's not working. So on slide 47, I played around with revising it. Which of the following statements which of the following statements do you agree with the most for people your age? People my age who smoke cigarettes have more friends. People my age who smoke do not have, who do not smoke have more friends, and then they have the same number. Now I don't know if that's going to work, so I'd say pre-test it again. That's a tough question. And I'm going to show you my favorite on slide 48. I asked I think it was a 14 or 15-year-old boy, in your lifetime, how many bones have you broken? Easy answer for him. 3. Broke my arm in 2 places while skateboarding, and I'm pretty sure I broke the goalie's nose in middle school soccer. Okay. Okay. Just to summarize, because we only have 10 more minutes, I hope you get the idea that writing a quality questionnaire is an enormous challenge. It's really difficult, and it's a topic that needs to be taken much more seriously, but there are lots of resources that can help us. I outlined these 8 fundamental themes, and they're outlined in lots of detail in the book. And so going back to this framework for following a logical sequential order and how we keep track in a file cabinet of the guidelines. One of my biggest frustrations is that when I talk to people or they see my book, they go, yeah, we're doing all that. And then I look at the questionnaire and in 20 minutes I can find 40 errors. And I know they haven't done the qualitative work. I know they didn't write a research plan, and we skip pre-testing. So I feel like I'm pulling the fire alarm on questionnaire design, but I'm in the same boat as all of you. The more I do this, it's like the more you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know. And so I'm more anxious going into designing a survey now than I was 10 years ago. And the analogy I'll give you is it's probably like writing, doing documentaries. Suppose you know the structure for doing documentaries, but every time you go in and you do something with a new population, it's a whole new can of worms, and you've got to learn the words they use, the phrases they use, and it's always extremely challenging. And before we go to Q&A, I want to let everyone know on slide 51, the last slide, if you ever have any questions or ideas or you want to share something, don't hesitate to contact me today, tomorrow, in a year, whatever. So here's my contact information. Thank you very much. I'll do Q&A now. Oh, I've got the Q&A right here. So I wrote down some of the questions that people may have. What about asking for percentages? Percentages, there's a guideline in there on that. That's tough because one of the good things about asking for a percentage in a lot of circumstances, that's an easier response for people, But the base has to be absolutely clear to people. Otherwise, you end up with situations like, what percent of the time do you spend selling products that are not on the formulary grid? 2 hours a week. I only sell 20 hours a week, 10%. Another person, 2 hours a week. I work 55 hours a week. I don't know what is that, 5? So they're using a different denominator. So I always say, let the computer do the math in some circumstances. Ask for the base, ask for the numerator and the denominator, let it do the math. But if it's a big thing, asking about a percentage can make it a bit easier. So This is one I added. This is my question to myself because I hope somebody would ask this. You know, Dave, you say all the time that that learning how to do this will save money, and you know it really does, because overall, I think if we were to do a random sample of 200 surveys, I think we could by organizing the research to support decisions using the guidelines, we could cut the length of the survey down easily by 30%, in some cases 50%. And I work a lot with the recruiting people about that, and boy, cutting that down just a little bit is huge. They have an enormous challenge when you have a 40-minute survey of getting people to complete it. So they're calling people back all the time. So in part, that's it. The other way that helps you save money, I can't tell you how many times I've been in a room where we did the qualitative work, we did the quantitative work, we present it, and the VP says, it's a really interesting study, but you know what I really need to know? Because I have to decide whether to do this. And we're off scrambling to do another study real quickly. And if you can get that nailed ahead of time, that certainly can save time. It's the not having to do the study twice. Do you have a question?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
This is probably basic, but what is your definition of measurement error? I'm used to thinking of statistical error, but that's the basis of this presentation. But I wondered how you defined it for yourself, for the book, and for this presentation.
Yeah, I just define measurement error as I think I'm asking about interest, and I'm not getting that, or I'm thinking about finding out how many hours per week people spend studying, but by the way I ask the question, I'm not getting the true number. That's really it. And what? Okay. Oh, is this the last question? Okay. Oh, yeah. Length of scale items, odd and even numbered. People ask me about that. Well, I mean, what I really want to do is just think about those issues and have that thinking go into the design of each survey, because sometimes I'm changing it all the time too. If it's a unipolar scale or a bipolar scale, I have a different view about the length. I wouldn't make the length longer than the measures people have. So when they ask me to rate their coffee on how satisfied I was with the temperature of it, I don't have 10 levels in my head, so don't ask me that on a 10-point scale. A 10-point scale might be fine for, please rate your pain. I think that's a really good heuristic. But generally speaking, if you're asking people a lot of questions, I keep the scale length shorter rather than longer, because otherwise they're going to start making up answers. I've seen it happen many, many times. And then on the issue of odd or even, the classic issue is with a bipolar. If you want to know whether people lean left or right, you make it, an even number. But what happens if you have an issue like, do you support or oppose Mark Rubio running for president? Support, favor, oppose. And you have no midpoint, and the person has no idea who Mark Rubio is. Then they're going to pick. This is a case of measurement error. You're going to have 30% of the people don't know who he is. They don't know whether they favor or oppose it, but they have to select an answer because you've not given them the opportunity to say, I neither favor or oppose. Or the other way to handle that is to screen people in to that question as to whether they know who he is, and then make them choose. So.
One more question.
Okay.
What do you recommend for a number of pretests one should do to really get a sense for, are we doing the right thing?
Yeah.
I've done projects where we've done a couple of pretests, and I've done 2 up to 8 pretests before the launch of a questionnaire. And do you recommend, if one is doing an online study, should they pretest online or telephone or in person? Might there be some biases if they
Yeah.
pretest online?
I mean, that's a big issue, and I think in private industry, I would do as many as I could get away with. I mean, in government research for something like, the census or whatever, they'll do hundreds maybe, so, per segment. So per segment, I personally would like to talk to at least 3. I'd like to talk to more if I could. per segment. And then it's always good to have them do that in the mode in which they're going to take the survey. But I think it's also perfectly fine to do a little of both. So someone might be taking the questionnaire online, but in fact, my first experience at L&E here, I set up 2 days of pre-testing, and it was something that was going to be online, but we had people come in and we talked to them. People will tell you to do more, but it's hard to get away with that in private industry, I think. Yeah, one more question?
No, just get Johnny. Was there a question?
Yeah, I did a quick question. In an online research study, do you find that you have a higher completion rate if you have a progress bar?
I don't know. I'm starting to collaborate with the recruiters and people who are fielding this, and I actually am going to be a columnist in a magazine pretty soon that's going to come out. So every month I'm going to write about those issues. That's the kind of thing that I want to learn a lot about, particularly dropout rates and how to minimize that, because that's a huge issue in measurement error. That contributes to measurement error too, because you're getting a certain bias.